Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another Marvel Snap video. And so as you can tell on the screen, it is a new season. So we are now in season 2, which I believe is the Thor season. I haven't looked yet because I want to draft the card. I'm going to draft whatever the card is for this season into a deck and play it completely blind. And I want to do that without having any kind of background knowledge. And so I am going to be doing that for today's video. But before I jump into that, I just want to say thank you guys for all of the continued support. We are nearing in on 750 subs now. And it's just, it blows my mind every day how much we are growing and how much support and feedback you guys give me to continue to grow and expand my content. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so we do have the card pulled up, and on reveal, shuffle Mjolnir into your deck. He's a 4-cost, 6-power card. So I am very curious at how strong Mjolnir is, because I think that will really determine what kind of deck we build around him. Off the top of my head, you want to try and either thin your deck to have a greater chance of pulling Mjolnir, or you want to somehow be able to cycle your cards with something like Lockjaw. And I think that's what I will probably do, but I want to see if we're able to figure out what Mjolnir does before we build that deck. So we went into our collection, we're able to find what Mjolnir does. So on reveal, give Thor +6 power. So I think the cycle is going to be the play. I think even something like Wong could be pretty good, where the on reveal triggers twice. Then all of a sudden, you play this card, you give Thor +12 power. So my idea is going to be, I'm going to drop this into a Lockjaw lane to get the on reveal ability, shoot it back into my deck, and try to pull it again to continue building up and expanding our Thor. It feels like decks that are going to be able to draw are going to be pretty consistent at getting this to trigger. As long as you're able to drop Thor on turn 4 on curve, it could be a pretty good. Could be a pretty good and pretty big minion. I think this actually sits in pretty well with our big minion deck, but maybe with a few tweaks to make it a little bit easier to cycle cards. Okay, so we drafted a deck. Is it going to be the best deck for this card? Probably not. But this deck is going to focus on getting Mjolnir out at least once, maybe twice, to make Thor in line with, if not bigger than, our 6-power cards. And so I'll run through each of the cards relatively quickly. Okoye, a cheap deck buff, so if we draw her early, she'll be able to buff up the deck. If not, then we'll be able to use her as a cheap cycle tool for Lockjaw. Sunspot is going to be able to be dropped in a lane, hopefully take an early lead, where we could make use of Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock, I want to make Adam Warlock good, but I have never found a good and consistent use for him, just because you have to invest so much additional resources in 2 energy, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it takes up a card slot to be able to get his effect to trigger. And so I want him to be good. I don't know if he will, but I do want to try him out again to thin our deck draw even more, to have more chances at drawing Mjolnir. And then with this card having just came out, and with Thor having just came out, what we want to do is anticipate what the opponents are going to run. If all of our opponents are trying to build a big Thor like we are, then I think an armor is going to be a good counterplay that we can drop so that it protects our Thor from Shang-Chi. And then Lockjaw being a big piece of this deck, being able to cycle through your cards to potentially draw Mjolnir out quickly or multiple times is a very, very big upside. And then we have Jubilee. Jubilee is going to work to thin our deck even further. So if we are able to cycle her with Lockjaw once, then we draw an extra card and she goes back into our deck to draw another one. She partners well with Chavez, being a primary target for Chavez, so that we can kind of control what she pulls in most of the time. Just like we're anticipating other opponents to play Shang-Chi to counter all the big minions and cards that are being built, I want to run Shang-Chi for the same reasons. I want to be able to counter all these big minion plays, which is probably what Thor is going to kind of draw out and encourage. And then, of course, we have our new card, Thor. On reveal, shuffle Mjolnir into your deck. So on reveal, give Thor +6 power. And so I'm kind of curious, if we end up cycling Thor with Lockjaw, and then we play Mjolnir before dropping Thor, does he still get the upside? I don't know that we would ever do that, because on turn 4, dropping a Thor back into your deck seems a bit risky. but it's just something that I'm curious, because I know the wording for the Thanos card says give Thanos plus 10 power wherever he's at. So whether he's in your deck, hand, board, but this one doesn't. So I'm curious how that interaction works. And then we have, for the rest of the deck, we have good cards to get cycled. So if they get pulled out of whatever we cycle into Lockjaw, then it's a pretty good upside. So Vision, we're going to be able to move, so we can, one, cycle an additional card into the Lockjaw lane. Plus, we have that flexibility to move him into lanes that cards can't be played, to have some pretty good upside out of having him pulled out of Lockjaw. And then we have Odin to re-trigger abilities, so whether that be Jubilee, whether that be our Mjolnir, where maybe we drop Mjolnir and then Odin on turn 6 to double buff Thor from a 6 to an 18 power card. Some really massive potential with Mjolnir costing 0. And then America Chavez, a consistent draw. It thins out your deck early, and then if you can pull her in with Jubilee, then it just thins your deck out overall. It makes the rest of your draws more consistent. And then to finish out the deck, we have Magneto, just a high power 6 cost card that would be good to either drop on turn 6 or to get pulled out by Jubilee, by Lockjaw. It presents power onto the board that's hard to counter, hard to anticipate. Now, one other card that I did consider was Arnim Zola, who, whenever he's played, he destroys the card in a random card in that lane and duplicates it in the other ones. I was thinking we could use this for targeting Mjolnir, and then we could easily then generate 2 more Mjolnirs, which would each give an additional 6 for an 18 power buff. It'd be a 24 power Thor, but I just don't think he is not a incredibly consistent card. So I think whenever we're using Lockjaw and we're cycling through, it always feels really, really bad to tank a draw whenever you grab Arnim Zola instead of something that you're wanting, because then it destroys a card. It may destroy your Lockjaw card. It may destroy something else that you don't want destroyed. So there might be some cool interactions with Arnim Zola and Thor to generate more Mjolnirs into your deck. And then if you have 3 Thors on the board, each time you play a Mjolnir, it should buff each of the Thors individually. And so you could get a whole lot of upside from that interaction. So that may be something we explore a little bit later on. Just, can we have 2 Thors that we just buff up incredibly large through our Arnim Zola? But I didn't feel like it was consistent enough to take on a first run. And then from our big deck, from our large minion deck, this is very similar in playstyle, but it does take out some of the other combo pieces. So like the Lady Sif Ghost Rider, it takes those pieces out because Thor is never going to get targeted by Lady Sif. And then we also took out Infinite because Infinite is the primary target for our Lady Sif combo, and we very rarely play him naturally otherwise. So he just didn't feel like a good card to run. A lot of times he would be a brick in your hand because we're not often going to be skipping turn 5 to be able to drop the Infinite. All right, with that being said, this is the first game that we are playing of the season, so we are ranked 70. So we are going to have to start slowly climbing back up until we get that Infinite Thor avatar, which we are shooting for this season as well. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. I hope that this deck does well. If not, then we'll kind of go back to the drawing board and we'll test from there. But I think this should be pretty decent at triggering Thor consistently. Okay, so we are jumping into our first match, and we do draw Odin into Titan. So we'll be able to drop Odin early to either be able to re-trigger Thor to generate a Mjolnir in the deck, or to be able to re-trigger Mjolnir once we get it. And then we draw Elysium. So Elysium is going to allow us to have our cards cost 1 less. So that's going to let us start enabling our Lockjaw. What a cool variant for Debris. I haven't seen any variant so far, so that one's pretty nice. I'd like to unlock it. Ooh, and then we do draw Thor, which they did block off some of our location. So we do need the on reveal, so we're going to drop Thor into Titan. We don't want to cycle him. And then next turn, we'll be able to kind of start our cycle spree. And they're going to ramp up. What kind of deck are they playing, I wonder? And so we do have the first part of our Thor combo out, and we're going to be able to cycle 2 cards. Do we want to drop Odin to generate an additional Mjolnir into our deck? I don't know. It feels like a dead draw if we get him here, and then we would have to rely on something else. I would like to draw him naturally. I would like to draw Mjolnir naturally, and then be able to drop it back into Lockjaw, because it feels like it will kill the Lockjaw lane as it is. We're going to do it. We're going to go ahead and do it. I think that's the best line of play that we have at making Thor large. And so then after that, we'll stop investing resources into this lane, because as we buff up Thor, it's not going to be worthwhile to generate additional upside in this lane. And so we grab Magneto, which is actually going to clear up some of the power that they have over here. They had Odin. Oh my gosh, so fortunate. Oh, so very, very fortunate that we drew debris off, because Odin would have locked out this lane with an additional rock. So very, very fortunate there. And so I say we cycle our Mjolnir there. I think we drop our vision here. That's going to allow us, I guess it won't matter, will it? We drop vision here, because we're not going to need to bounce him around. This is going to be the last chance that we have to cycle out Mjolnir. And so we're going to put it back into our deck. This lane, I think, will be locked down. And then it just comes down to winning this other one, which we have a decent amount of power in Magneto. So they're going to have to work for these lanes. And so I think they are running like a counter to the Thor Jubilee Lockjaw type combo, because that's probably what is running pretty rampant on the lanes right now. So I still can't believe how lucky we got with our Magneto pull there. Okay, and so then we do get our Thor. That is going to make our Thor a big 12 power card, which if they have Shang-Chi, which they probably do, feels kind of bad. Ooh, and then Jubilee there does feel unfortunate as well. And then Professor X is interesting in this lane, because the more Mjolnirs we drop, the bigger he's going to get. So we have the ability to buff him up, even though this one's locked down. So that seems interesting. And then they used Wave, which all of these cards are reduced already. So we have Initiation, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would say that we would absolutely drop Shang-Chi here. But they're going to have to push 2 lanes. And we have a decent amount of power. So we have 10. I think we're pretty confident. We have 10 that's not going to be able to be targeted by their Shang-Chi. So I think we're in a pretty decent spot here. So we're going to snap. We're going to go ahead and end the turn and let it play out if they allow us. But I think we have a good shot here. Okay, so they just drop a card in mid. And they let their Sunspot buff up to 20, which means it's a tie, but we win the right lane very, very heavily. So overall, not a bad first play with Thor. I do think the Lockjaw idea is kind of clunky, but let's go ahead and jump back in and see. Okay, so up next we have Saurian. So might not be the best idea, but I'm going to drop Okoye into the unknown location on the far right, followed by Adam Warlock on turn 2, so that maybe we can get and sneak an additional draw out of them, anticipating that they're not going to play a card until they know what that location is. Ooh, and we shuffled 5 rocks into our deck, which is just awful. It's just awful for this type of deck. And if you're trying to cycle, I can see things like a debris deck or a disrupt deck or a lockdown deck really making it difficult to get your Thor and Mjolnir out onto the board. So it does seem like a lot of work to make that combo happen, but it is something I still want to explore. Oh, that feels so bad. It feels bad, but it feels okay at the same time. So the reason it's somewhat okay, they do get an additional energy, but they have to make the decision of if they want to allow us to continue to draw extra cards every single turn, or if they want to give up their additional energy. So then it becomes a back and forth battle for them, and so they are going to opt to give up their additional energy to stop us from drawing cards. And they drew, oh my gosh, and they drew in a rock with their Jubilee, which is the biggest downside to Jubilee. Once something gets shuffled into your deck, it no longer has that consistency to draw Chavez. And so fortunately for us, it it drew in a rock. I'm going to drop a Sunspot there, and I'm going to cycle a card with Lockjaw so that maybe we can cycle into Thor here. But if not, we are going to be able to win the Superflow for this turn, which is going to draw us an additional card. And we do cycle into Thor, which is just beautiful. We couldn't ask for a better cycle for our Lockjaw at this point. And so now we have Mjolnir in our deck, and we can begin trying to pull him and trying to get him onto the board. So I'm a little bit torn. I kind of want to drop a Jubilee. That's going to give us 2 additional chances to get cards out, to get Mjolnir out onto the board. But at the same time, they're running a wave combo. So I'm wondering if they are going to have like a Shang-Chi, or if they're going to have something that will disrupt that play line. And if so, then I would really need to have an armor here to protect him once we buff him up once with Mjolnir. But I think for the sake of wanting to... It feels bad. It feels real bad. For the sake of wanting... Okay, so now we have 2 Mjolnirs in our deck, which is, I mean, at this point, not great because we're only going to get one more draw. But it's not terrible either. And so they do draw into Chavez this time around. So we're not going to get the additional card this time. So with our 11 power... So do we ever... So let's say we drop Shang-Chi here. That's going to give us 5 power overall. So it's going to make us 11. We're also going to take down their 10, which would make them 9. I think we sneak this Superflow lane by dropping Shang-Chi. By dropping Shang-Chi, are they able to win this lane is the question. I think I snap back. That may be a bit ambitious, because if they have a Shang-Chi of their own, they can take out Odin at the very least. And maybe they're hoping that they'll take out both Odin and Thor. But I think we do this. I think it's hard to anticipate that we are going to destroy this lane. Yeah. And so they just drop a Vision. We are able to swing both of these in our favor. So not a strong showing from Mr. Thor, but a strong showing from Sunspot Shang-Chi to close out that win. And we got somewhat lucky with our Lockjaw rotations. And so I think overall we did err on the side of luck on this one. But at the same time, it feels really nice to be winning. And that could be because we're down in the 70 rank. People are trying out new decks for the new season. Maybe they're just jumping back on. But it does feel good to be winning some higher cube games with a sneaky Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is really hard to anticipate because I'm sure they were calculating and factoring in that they had locked down and won the Superflow, and we were able to sneak it away. All right, so for our next game, we have Safety Blade. And we do draw into some of the pieces that we need to make this a successful deck. We have Lockjaw. We have Adam Warlock, we have our Thor, all of which are big pieces in making Thor, giving Thor the best chance to get that upside. Now, do I think Thor is going to be a really consistent card in this style of deck or really in like a big minion deck? Probably not. You have to jump through a few too many hoops, I think, to make it viable with the cards that I currently have. And maybe we think of some other combo down the line where we can make him more consistent. And so I opted to not drop Adam Warlock on turn 2 to give us an additional cycle tool. So we're going to be able to cycle 2 cards next turn, or turn 5 rather, because we're going to want to drop Thor before we start cycling. And so I think we drop our Lockjaw into Muir Island just to kind of so strange. Unless you have an Odin, which you're going to use to re-trigger that on reveal. So strange to drop the Ghost Rider before the other pieces of your deck or the other pieces of your discard. And so maybe, okay. Oh no, you discarded Hela. Oh no. Well, we don't get to see Thor grow in this one. The one big downside to a Hela deck is that if you discard Hela, you are very, very, very much out of tools and resources. And so They retreated once Hela was discarded. Okay, so next up we have Too Legit, and the hub gives us a low-cost card in Misty Knight, which it usually, I don't know, I feel like I always get mid-range cards out of the hub, but Misty Knight actually helps us a little bit. So we have Lockjaw already. We're going to be able to drop Misty Knight to initiate our cycle a little bit easier than what we would have otherwise, and it gave them Sunspot. Man. Okay, and so cards can't be destroyed in Wakanda. So that's nice, and we have Thor already in place. So I think we plan on dropping Thor into this far right lane. Next turn we'll play Lockjaw here, because as we draw large minions into this lane, we don't have to worry if they're going to get destroyed or if they can get destroyed by Shang-Chi. And then so we just countered Death's Domain. You just have to anticipate Death's Domain. And so we dropped armor, and so cards are going to be able to be played into Death's Domain now because of that. And so we're going to drop Thor into this lane. That way we can kind of guarantee that we're buffing up cards in multiple areas. So no matter if we have our big minions here or here, it doesn't necessarily matter. Unless they're trying to lock it down with Storm. I don't know why they moved their Nightcrawler so early. That seems like a waste of a move, because then it really into a Scarlet Witch. It just seems like an interesting play line. Okay, so we have Mjolnir in our deck. What we're going to do is start our rotation. We don't rotate Adam Warlock because we're going to be able to rotate and pull 3 cards out. Jubilee is going to pull a card out of her deck. Misty Knight, of course, is going to jump in, and then Jubilee will get cycled by herself. And so since they can't move any cards here, I think we go ahead and snap. We may not get to see our huge Thor here. But I just don't think there's anything additional that they can do with this lane besides like a Khazar, a Blue Marvel. And so we get 1 Mjolnir drop, and we'll be able to compete there. And so I think, would I have liked to see it play out? Yeah. But do I think the more strategic and cube-oriented gameplay would be to snap there and press your advantage? Also, yes. And so what I wanted to do was do that. We are not at a point where we are at rank 120 anymore. We're actually actively climbing, and so I want to capitalize on as many cube gains as I can and donate as few as I can. Sometimes once I am past 100, if I anticipate a loss, I let it play out anyways, just so that I can see how close my call was, see how much my thinking aligned with theirs, just as kind of like a final practice. But when we're actually playing for cubes that I guess matter, it's not something that I want to do. I want to retreat more often as long as it is strategic to do so. I want to press the advantage as much as often as long as it's strategic to do so. Okay, so in our opening hand, we do have Okoye and Sunspot, but I think similar to the other game, we drop Okoye because we get more upside out of the buff, the 5 turns with cards buffed in our hand, plus additional buffed cards through Lockjaw, than just letting Sunspot buff up. And we have Thor in our hand, so we'll be able to drop him on turn 4. To make the combo work, we would have to draw into Lockjaw, which we do, and I'm going to opt to not drop Sunspot here, and that way we have that as a cycle tool for our Lockjaw. But it becomes, oh no. So on turn 4, transform into one of the other locations. So there's a chance that we have 2 Gilas or 2 Onslaught Citadels. So if they have ongoing abilities, that becomes pretty rough. And they have a Lockjaw as well. So either we're going to start seeing a lot of rocks. Okay, so I really don't want to take the hit and drop Thor here, but I also don't think they're going to drop many resources there either. And it makes our cycle just so inconsistent. I think we compete for the left and the right lane, anticipating that they drop resources there, similarly to what we're wanting to do. So they drop a Spider-Woman, which then cycles out for Storm. Oh, okay. So luckily we do have enough resources that we're able to almost cycle through all of the cards we want. Hallelujah. So what we're going to do, we get very, very lucky on the Mjolnir draw. Very, very fortunate. What we're going to do is we're going to drop Mjolnir first to add Mjolnir back into our deck. And then we're going to drop Sunspot and Adam Warlock so that we can potentially draw Mjolnir again into this lane. This being the last time that cards can be played here, we want to max it out as much as we can. And so let's go ahead and go with that. I still can't believe we drew Mjolnir off. We just top decked it off the top. It's just so ridiculous. And then Magneto, which is a beautiful card to have cycled into so that we can actually compete with the flooding location. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. We really just need armor in Onslaught. Not there. We don't need armor there. We need armor into the other Onslaught Citadel. And so they did bring forward quite a bit of power with... Oh, what an interesting cycle. A lot of like cool unreveal abilities in like Mantis and Gamora, which pretty cool. So what we do is we just drop Chavez in the middle. If they are going to Shang-Chi, they're going to have to Shang-Chi here. That's going to take up too much of their resources. So we're going to anticipate that. We want to play into the fact that we have a big Thor, and they're going to want to target it. So we're going to drop Chavez here. That should be enough to win us the lane. And we win this one, we should be able to win one of the other two, even with a Shang-Chi. So is that what they drop, or did they just drop it? Why'd they let that play out? Why'd you let that play out? But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and end the video on that note. That game feels like probably one of the best ones that we're going to have with this iteration of the deck. Does it work well? It works okay. I don't think it is an S-tier deck. I think because of the fact that a lot of times you're going to brick your Lockjaw lane by cycling your low cards and pulling additional low cards into that lane. You can't guarantee that you're going to get as much upside as in a large mini Lockjaw cycle. And so it becomes, sometimes you're not going to be able to be competitive in this lane. And so then you still have to figure out how to win that third lane, even if you have a Thor and you hit Mjolnir twice. We fortunately got lucky and top decked into a Magneto, which was able to lock down this lane. Otherwise, it would have been a little bit tougher of a spot for us to try and figure out and anticipate. But with this deck in the 70 rank, right off a reset, we played 10 games. We won 8 of those 10 games. One of the games we retreated because we felt like we had the tactical in advantage, and then the other 2 we just didn't hit our cards. They hit their cards. So overall, with the opponents that we were matching up with, it performed very, very well. I still don't think it is absolutely optimal. I think this is definitely a first iteration, like a proof of concept type thing, but with the chance of bricking your Lockjaw lane by having Mjolnir stick there and no way to destroy it feels pretty bad. But otherwise, it feels pretty decent overall, just like the deck idea overall, but it's going to take some refinement. So probably Adam Warlock. Maybe if we drew Wasp, we would throw a 0-cost Wasp in Adam Warlock's spot just for some cheaper cycles, and maybe a few other ways to thin out the deck if possible. But I am going to end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know what you guys thought. Let me know what you guys thought of this new audio level. I am recording the tracks separately so that I can individually mix them at the end when in post-production. So let me know what you guys thought. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like down below. I appreciate all of your support, all of your feedback, and I appreciate each and every one of you guys. So I'm going to end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.